Hello, and welcome back to Ambitious. All right, ladies, we are diving into a series that you have heard on earlier episodes. It has been one of our favorite types of episodes that people are like, can we do more of these? Can we lean more into this? And so we are going to be having these as featured episodes more frequently because of all your feedback. So thank you so much for everyone who has messaged and said how much you love these types of episodes. The feature that I am referring to is what we call Ambitious Unfiltered, which is really a place where we are doing the equivalent of hot seat coaching. And so, just for a little bit of reference, when you are on our page, or even if you're on our website, you will see that there's a form for Ambitious on the podcast page. So, if you literally go to www.kateperkovic.com and head to the podcast page that is featured on my website, you will see that there's a form there where you can actually submit questions. So, my dream, and this is still something that is in the works, but my dream one day is to actually have like a full-on call-in show where you can literally have specific times where you can hop on and call in, and I answer questions live for you, where you're able to say, hey, here's what's coming up for my business, and we do some live coaching. But as a stepping stone to that, we have what's considered to be Ambitious Unfiltered, which is basically a place you can submit questions and I answer them as questions, just like we're going to do today on an episode for you. So if you do want to submit a question of something that's coming up for you, for your business, or maybe just for yourself as the individual, as the CEO, you definitely can do so. So again, www.kateperkovic.com, go to the podcast heading, and there is a form there that allows you to submit a question. By the way, these questions are entirely anonymous, so you can give me all of the tea of anything that's coming up for you, numbers, facts, figures, anything specific as pertains to your business, because we will always answer those with 100% privacy. And so without further ado, let's get into today's Ambitious Unfiltered episode of some hot seat questions. So question numero uno: how do I take my marketing from regional/grassroots to a more national type of marketing? So this is something that, especially with social, people often have questions about, which is location, in the sense of usually there's one of two buckets. Like, some people find that when they post, they only basically go out to their existing network. And then other people find that when they post, they go out to sometimes communities that they don't want to go to, or are really not technically what they had as their dominant or their targeted area, but ultimately is where their podcasts end up going out to. So for me, for example, I'm Canadian, so I'm from Toronto. And for me, most of my content goes out to everyone in the States and Europe. States, Europe, and Australia are actually my top three places when it comes to where people consume my content, where people find my content. And that wasn't necessarily intentional, to be honest. It wasn't like I was trying to target, the US or trying to target Europe by any means. But it was really something that over time started to take shape, and then we became more aware of it. And then again, it just kind of started to integrate its way into our awareness for our business model. But sometimes when I coach people, they'll say, well, how do I, if I feel like I live in Toronto, let's just say, and I feel like all my content's going out to people in Toronto, how do I branch out and get in front of wider audiences? And so there's a couple things to not do if you're looking to try to get in front of a larger audience. So one of the things that I actually recommend to people when they're trying to appeal to a bigger audience is not speak so much about maybe what your location or your current like geographical area is in your content specifically. So like for me, a lot of people when they meet me don't even know that I am Canadian. And they're like, oh, like, where do you live exactly? And I was like, oh, Toronto. Like, oh my gosh, you're Canadian. Like, and that's because 90% of my audience doesn't know that I'm Canadian, and they just consume me like they consume any other American in their belief when they're consuming my content. The other thing that you can also do is actually do tagging and targeting of different types of areas. So like when you're putting up content, you can actually location tag with things to help to kind of basically plant the algorithm in your favor to put you in the realm of the content going out in those areas. But if I'm going to be honest, one of the most targeted ways, specifically with organic, if you're doing paid advertising, you have a little bit, well, I wouldn't even say a little bit, I would say much more control over the types of audiences and like what geographical areas you're able to go for with ads, because you're able to target them much, much more. With organic, I think one of the most important things that you can do is really make sure that you're doing a lot of visibility-based marketing. And that basically means that it's not specific to location. For example, reels on Instagram are a great way to get put into non-audience type content. Now, the thing that I will also say is that your VPN is also something that does impact where your content goes. So, for example, like when I have people that I work with who have marketing agencies or are social media managers, something that we're really cognizant of is like when someone's posting, where the VPN says that they're posting from. Now, this may not be something when it comes to your account that you have changed or that you've altered, but sometimes people can have their content being sent to an audience that's not their ideal audience based off the fact that their VPN is actually basically rooted in another place, or it's kind of like located or tagged to be in another location. And so that is also something that I would recommend looking into to see if there's anything potentially there that could be causing a change in location. But I will say it does take time. So like if you want to tap into a larger audience, like for example, I've worked with people in Europe who want to target Canada and US. I've worked with people in South Africa who want to target the US market. And they've all been very successful at doing so. But I will say, like, it does take consistent reps and effort when it comes to the marketing to be able to allow you to do that. And is really something that does take a little bit of time. So if you wanted to become much more known on a national basis than you are maybe in like a hometown or a kind of a core area, it is something I would say I would probably want to give you around like 6 months before really saying whether we've seen leaps and bounds with it. It's not something you're going to see necessarily change overnight within like a 7-day period of posting marketing. So just something to kind of like more than anything help with like a setting of expectations around how quick you might see it alter. Okay. So question 2, how should I best look to scale into having full-time employees? Well, one of the things that I would say is I think we first want to look at what's causing you to feel like you need to have somebody full-time. And it's not to say that you don't need someone full-time, by the way. It's just more a matter of I want to make sure that you're taking a second before you hire somebody full-time and actually asking yourself why. There's this big misconception, I think, that because somebody's not full-time in your business, they're not committed. And I've just seen with some of the contractors we've worked with that I don't necessarily know that that's true. Like, yes, do they sometimes have other things that they're doing? Sure. But I do think that people can be very, very committed to you and to your business, even if they're not full time. So I also just want to kind of add that in there as a piece of consideration. Now, full time employees, when we're setting a salary, we really want to be clear when someone's full time that they are completely integrated into your business. So, how to scale to four employees, I would really be looking at what are the 4 positions and ultimately the 4 different kind of subsections of problems that you need changed in your business or fixed in your business. So, it might be like a person for marketing, a person for sales, a person for delivery, a person for back end, right? And you've got a full-time person in each. You really want to think less about, I think sometimes when people think salaries or they think about going full time, they just think about like, oh, I'm going to take whoever is doing 20 hours right now and just make them 40 hours. But there really is a difference when someone's an employee because you're getting them bought into your values, your principles as a business, your mission as a business. You've got also aspects of like growth plans. So, how are you going to help that person to not just enter your company and be full time, but also grow within their full time role? Because we also recognize like people don't like to stay stagnant. People don't like to feel like nothing is changing, nothing is growing, or that they're not able to evolve. And so it's really important that you also look at when you're hiring them, where is the trajectory of where you see them going, not just that you need them to execute 40 hours a week. And salary. So here's the thing when it comes to full-time employees, which is something why I have these like really intentional conversations with scaling entrepreneurs, because when you bring on someone full-time, that's a big decision in your business. And that's because a lot of the time, full-time employees are connected to a yearly salary. And when we have a yearly salary, you have responsibilities now to this person. This is not necessarily oftentimes somebody who has a variable, not that they can't be and be full-time, but very rarely are they a variable type of compensation, meaning that their compensation changes and fluctuates with the fluctuation of the cash flow in the business. So because of that, if the person and their income doesn't fluctuate with the fluctuation of the cash flow in the business, it means that you have cost regardless of how much you bring in. If you don't bring enough in and you have that cost, you then have to lay people off. So like there really is like this domino of a level of security that the business ideally should be at before we really consider bringing on full-time employees and not just like somebody who's maybe a contractor within your business. So scaling to full time, I would also say don't do it all at once. My biggest recommendation is really trying to bring on 1 to max 2 people and onboarding them per quarter, especially if you're a small business and you're just starting to get your team up and rolling. Because the thing that otherwise happens is, and I just see this time and time again with teams, they bring people on, they don't really give them any aspect of training, and they're like, okay, great, like go do your job. And then when the person can't effectively do their job, they then get frustrated when really what it comes down to is the business or the leader doesn't have adequate time to train the person to make them a real asset to be helpful in the business. And so the expectations are completely skewed and people are basically throwing someone in and saying like press go. So when we think about bringing employees, you're thinking about investing in somebody in the long haul. You're investing into them by helping them to understand your values and your principles. You're investing into them by doing training. You're investing into them by giving, for example, like, paid leave and paid vacations and things of that nature. Like bringing someone on as a full-time employee is not a small decision, in my opinion. And that's because I don't think it's a small decision because it shouldn't be taken lightly when you have that level of responsibility for someone's life and their compensation and all of those pieces. We want to be really conscious of the fact of like, what does that mean when we bring somebody into that? So I would say bring on max 2 people per quarter. Make sure you have a very good understanding of what your team training is, of like who you guys are and how you operate and what you believe to be true and what your values are. And then also make sure you have position specific training for them. So again, like where can they go to have resources and things to reference that will help them to expand within their role. And then from there, once we have those clear, we then basically go into, okay, well, how can we take this and make it rinse and repeat? The thing that helps us when we're hiring is to make those resources, because when you make those resources around your values and your beliefs and your principles and all of those things, you then now have us for other hires. So this is the other thing I also want to say around this. When you're training somebody to come into your team, you shouldn't be creating training for Sarah. You should be creating training for like your sales closer position, not for the person. It's for the position. And that's also the distinguishing factor that I think is a really big one for people that I would focus on, is looking at like, are we doing everything very specific to people, or are we looking at positions? Because positions really are what you're hiring. Those are just the people who are going to do them. And that was a big lesson that I learned when I was, building team and expanding team. I was so focused on like, how am I going to get this person, when really what it comes down to is it's not about like Sarah or Susan or Stephanie. It's more a matter of like, I need a sales closer, a marketing role, and so and so. And these are the people that fill those roles. But when you have turnover or change within a team, which can happen as you're scaling, you don't want to make all of your training and all your resources specific to who your team members are, but instead to the positions that the team possesses. Because then should a team member leave, you're not having to remove Sarah from everything and substitute her with Susan. You're just saying, hey, the sales closer role was blank, and now I just have a different person who's doing that role. It allows for a little bit more fluidity within the team expansion. So that would also be something that I would note for you. Okay. Question number 3, what would you recommend to add in when someone is going into a launch and trying to create energy and hype going around their promotion? So, I think the main thing that I would say around promoting and creating hype is not just alone. It's a piece of it is your energy, but it's not just your energy when you're trying to create hype into a promotion. There's actually stages of a launch, which I'm going to do another episode on, because I see so many people misunderstanding what launching is or what promotions are. And I want to do kind of an unpacking of that. But when it comes to leading into a promotion that you're doing, you want to remember that hype is not just energy. Hype and launch is actually an intentional marketing campaign. So the way that I explain it is when you're doing evergreen marketing, you're moving one person at a time down the buying process, right? So like someone sees your post, they move. Someone sees your story, they move. You're moving a person at a time. When you're launching, you're like herding sheep, right? Like you're literally shifting people and a group of people at a time. So people who didn't think they had a problem now know they have a problem. People who knew they had a problem but thought they could solve it on their own now have shifted down to being like, no, I definitely want someone to help me solve this, right? So with a launch, you're really trying to shift a mass of people. So the way you're going to shift a mass of people, actually in the sense of creating hype and momentum around your launch, does start with the early teasing. So one of the things that's really important in launching is people oftentimes will just like drop an offer in like the link in their bio or on their website, or they'll be like, it's available now. And I see so many people who have really, really great offers, but they don't capitalize on them basically at all because they just don't know how to market them. They don't know how to promote them. They don't know how to create energy around them. So they really just lose the power of what they could do simply based off the fact that they haven't created any momentum around it. So to me, I would personally say teasing is one big thing that needs to happen. I like remember even with this podcast, I teased this podcast for like 9 months before it came out because then there was a lot of people who were like, "Hey, your podcast, when's it coming out?" People were energized about it. I also had a lot of teasing, for example, around our website that we did and our new branding coming out. That was something I teased for like 3-4 months before it released. So like it's something that I think teasing is also something that creates a lot of curiosity in people, which causes them to kind of latch on to your marketing as you get closer and closer to your launch. I do also think that having an aspect of like really good problem aware is going to help people. And by problem aware, I mean doing really symptomatic type messaging and marketing really helps people to self-identify. And I think that that's a really important piece that helps people to be like, wait a second, that's me. Now I'm listening. I think also, the media also helps a lot. So like media and the type of marketing you're putting out, I will tell you like the emotional type of marketing of like things that pull on your heartstrings in the sense of either create momentum and excitement in you, kind of move you, shift your state into sense of like really like awareness and inspiration and insight. Like those types of pieces of media really get people activated. And again, the goal with creating hype is actually creating curiosity because you want to remember when you're creating hype around a launch, they don't know anything yet. Like you're not releasing details. You're not talking about the nuts and bolts of what you're doing. You're literally just basically marketing and selling, if you will, energy. And so how do we market and sell energy? Well, the way to market and sell energy is by creating curiosity. It's for people to feel like they can latch on to what the essence of what you're saying is, the feeling of what you're saying, the problems you're talking about, but they don't really have any logistical product, program, or service yet to really understand what it's about. And so to create hype to me is your energy and that you're bringing to the marketing for sure. It's the energy that comes through the media and the actual materials that you're releasing. It's the symptomatic self-identifying type of messaging. And it's also the teasing and testing and making sure that you're really priming people that something's coming and doing so in an intentional way. So you have people locked into your marketing before the more quote unquote strategic or I would say structured stuff gets released. So really, really good question. Question number 4. Okay, what would you recommend focusing on as a brand? Should we do personal brand socials or have a dedicated business page if we're someone who's looking to build an agency? This is such a good question. And it's actually something I get as a question quite often, which is, do I have separate pages? Do I have the same page? And this is kind of like I would say, core answer, regardless of who you are. When we think about having separate pages, the only time that I recommend having separate pages is number 1, if you can be consistent with creating content on 2 separate profiles. The amount of people who segment profiles and they're barely putting out content on their first one, let alone putting out content on 2. If you don't have consistent content going out on your individual profile right now, I would by no means recommend you to add another profile or add another responsibility. So that's like my number 1 piece that will automatically answer the question for you potentially. Now, say you are super regularly consistent and you're just like rapidly posting. I would say when it comes to creating a separate page, you want to ask yourself, why do you feel the need to do so? I think there is this, misconception that as a personal brand, you can't be multifaceted, you can't be multi-passionate. And in my opinion, there really is an opportunity for you to post a lot of different things on one page. Like you can be a personal brand and have an agency and have those both on one page, assuming that they are the same ideal client. Like, for example, I have a client who has a fitness brand. She's a fitness influencer, and she's also the CEO of a full business agency in the sense of like does marketing, operations, sales, everything. And so because of that, she has 2 totally different audiences for her personal brand. versus her agency. So like they're not the same type of avatar at all. One is looking to solve a fitness and a more apparel around fitness type of problem. And then the other one is looking to solve the problem of like their business operations and functioning. So because the ideal client is different, it does make sense to separate the profiles. It's when you're marketing yourself and your knowledge around marketing, let's just say you have a marketing agency, it makes sense to put it all on one page. Because the thing that you want to think about is, even if you had consulting and agency underneath your umbrella of your business, you want to remember that the pain points really are pretty similar, right? Like the pain points are pretty, spot on with an agency type of client as they are a consulting client for marketing. The main difference is one person in consulting wants to learn marketing, the other person wants to have someone do their marketing. And so at the end of the day, though, they both want the same results from the marketing. And so that same profile is going to probably be the simplest option for you because you have the same ideal client that's on that one page. Now, the thing that I will say is you can also have, which is the last piece, niche profiles, which means like, for example, for myself, for Ambitious, we have Ambitious TikTok and we also have Ambitious YouTube and we have Ambitious Instagram. And that's because those profiles are literally a place where people can just deep dive and binge everything as it pertains to Ambitious. So if someone really, really likes Ambitious, they're able to go to our Instagram on Ambitious and literally see all the clips of the episodes just for the podcast on there alone. So like maybe they follow me on my business content, but they really want to make sure that they're up to speed with the podcast. If that was intermingled with my main content, it really would get super muddled. And so for us, we tease a little bit of it on my personal profile, but it has its own full profile. So if someone's really invested in listening to the podcast, that they have the ability to kind of get all the updates in one core place. And so I also will say separate profiles can also be something that even if it is the same avatar, so for example, you are probably the same person who consumes my page as, might consume Ambitious's page. All of that is the same person, but it's a different type of consumption in the sense of a different type of content that's going to be found one place or another. So that's the only other situation where I would say sometimes a niche specific profile can be warranted. Okay. So question number 5, how do I push people through the sales buying process? I feel like I have a lot of interest, but my leads are not sold on making an investment and working with me. Oh, sales process. I feel like there's so much I could say around this because sales process questions for me are typically something that I feel like are like always like 2 hours because there's just so many pieces. Is it an application? Is it a sales page? Is it DM selling? Is it phone consultation? All of those pieces. So here's the thing, right? People are inquiring, but basically they're not closing. There's a variety of reasons why that happens. This is a very, very frequent and common problem that businesses experience. So also if you're going through this, hi, that's normal. These things happen, but there are ways to adjust it and to refine it so you can also change and refine the results. So when it comes to people interested, but they're not converting, one of the reasons that can be definitely can be the marketing messaging. So sometimes people, let's just say, are scoping out you're getting a lot of website clicks, you're getting a lot of application inquiries, but they're not quite converting. That can be a byproduct of the fact that people are not actually warm from your marketing. They're not quote unquote pre-sold on you and making an investment into you. And so oftentimes that means we do need to be doing a little bit more legwork on the messaging and the marketing itself to get people to a place where through what they're seeing, they're ready to push down the buying process. So for myself, for example, with my website, what we found was there was a spot in our business, this was about over a year ago, where we had a lot of people that were going to the website, but the people who were going to the website, there was a disconnect between visitors to the website, clicks on the application, and how many people are actually going through. Come to find out, I was like, okay, like just people going to try to find my offer through the application, but they're not moving. So what we ended up doing was we had originally just one sales page. We took that down, we replaced it just with our application, and we got even more data, which told us people were going to the application, but they weren't completing it. So I was like, okay, I know what this means. It's either the questions on the application are too much, but it wasn't that. We were losing them on question number 1. And so I was like, okay, this is a matter of like they're nurturing. That's what it is. So when we went and then investigated getting a website done, that was the basis of why we wanted to launch the website. So when we launched the website, We then put that up, which was a way for people to basically pre-nurture and pre-sell themselves. It was a way that on a random Tuesday, if somebody felt like, ooh, okay, I feel kind of activated by what Kate said, that they're able to go check out the VIP Day sales page or the Accelerator sales page and kind of take that, investigate on their own, and then take that and run with it. Whereas when we didn't have that, we found that we were losing people because they weren't fully understanding of what we offered and most importantly, what could support them. So by putting that in the front facing, by having a website that was really dialed in, it allowed people to kind of nurture themselves. And that drastically changed our application completion rates. And it drastically changed how many people were booking calls because they were going through the website, then the application, not just direct to the application. So the thing I will say is there sometimes can be an aspect here of nurturing when people are seeing your stuff but not buying. If people are also seeing your application and not buying, it can very much have something to do with the process. So it could have something to do with the fact that you have way too many questions on your application, or you're getting people booked into a call, but you have the most random available spots and times for people to book with you. It could be the fact that your call times are like 13 days out from when you're asking people at the initial inquiry. The next time you have available is 2 weeks from now. There's a multitude of reasons why people won't convert. The thing that I have found is there's kind of two sides. There's the marketing, which is the nurturing of the individual coming in. But if they get into your sales process, like they complete the application, they get on the phone, or they're answering the DMs, whatever your process might be, that tells me that our issue is not marketing. That tells me that your issue is your sales process. And what I mean by that is like the way in which you're selling in DMs, the way in which you're selling on the phone, the way in which you're selling in whatever way. And, we even had this with a client. We just did a call with them like this past week. And the main kind of like quote unquote pain point was like, I feel like I have these people who are sliding in my DMs. They're messaging me words like keywords to like, be interested to work with me. And yet they're not buying. And like, I'm so frustrated because it's just like, I'm having so many inquiries. There's so much potential business underneath my nose, but they're just not moving. So we actually went through piece by piece. I went through her sales page. I went through her application. I went through all the pieces. Come to find out that the disconnect was actually in the DMs. So the DM conversations were taking way too long. They were very dragged out in the sense of like she was really wanting to like serve, but she was almost over serving people in the DMs to the point where it kind of was starting to bleed a little bit almost into the coaching bucket. And so we put a little bit more structure around the way in which she was talking in the DMs. And once she did, she literally was like, Kate, this is going to be like a $60,000 month with some of these changes. Like she was taking the interest and now actually seeing them move through the pipeline. And it had nothing to do with her marketing. It had nothing to do with her sales page. It was literally the DM flow itself. So I think, my high level answer to this, because again, as I said, I can go into a sales pipeline training for probably like 3-4 hours because there's just so much to unpack with it and so many lenses how you can look at it. But when we're looking at a pipeline, literally what I want you to think about, if you want to think about it as like a visual, think about like a chain of links. Each part of the links in the chain is information for us. So link number 1 might be your sales page. Link number 2 is your application. Link number 3 is book a call. Link number 4 is then they go to a thank you page. Link number 5 is they get a confirmation email. Link number 6, right? Like you can kind of see there's links in this. So depending on how each link is doing, it tells us where they're getting stuck. So for example, if someone's like, Kate, I'm getting like 10 calls booked, but no one's closing, what do you think is their problem? Probably not getting calls booked, meaning the marketing actually getting people on the phone with them is not the issue. So I'm not even going to investigate the marketing because if we're having people getting on the phone who are qualified, the marketing's not the problem. So if people are showing up to the call, but they're not closing, it tells me that there's something on the call that's not working. So the way that the person's communicating the offer, the way that they're structuring the call, the way that they're selling, something about the call itself is where the disconnect is. And so the thing that I think is the biggest learning that I have around sales processes, and again, like it's a very, to be thorough in this answer for you would take me a very long time because there's a lot to unpack. So what I've learned with sales processes is the fact that a sales process, if you don't understand how it's structured, means that you might actually be solving for the wrong problem. And I see this all the time. I see people who are like, Kate, I need more leads, or oh, I need to refine my marketing. And then I go through their data of their marketing and I go through the data of their sales. And I'm like, this is not a marketing problem. This is a sales process problem. You're losing people in your links of your chain. It has nothing to do with the marketing. The unfortunate part, which is why I'm so bullish on people understanding these things and understanding these principles, is because when you do, you can actually solve the right problem. Because the thing you want to think about is if you have people who are stuck in your sales process, you're like, okay, more marketing, more marketing, more marketing. It's not going to make the problem better. If anything, it's actually going to make the problem worse because it means you're adding more leads through something that isn't working. So for me, it's really important in general with business for you to understand how to diagnose when you're experiencing X in business, what the root of that problem is. Because without being able to do so, it means that you might be solving for the wrong source of the problem, which then means you might actually be exacerbating what's happening right now. So just something I want to add with that is I think it's really important if you're feeling a disconnect with your sales process to make sure you understand what all the links in your chain are and how to evaluate each one and the data in it so you can actually see where the issue is. Fun part about sales processes is that it's not a hypothesis. Like it's not I wonder what's happening. You'll literally know. You'll literally know if you understand sales process and the links in the chain of a sales process and how to evaluate them, you will literally know what's going on in your business in the sales department at all times and exactly how to fix it. Because with each link comes certain types of expectations of what we want to see. And then for each link, we also have what we want to see and then also what we do if it's not going the way that we want it to. And so all of it really helps to empower you to know exactly what to do to overcome it. So huge, huge fan on understanding sales process. So I would say to the question of them not working with you and not wanting to invest with you, I would be looking at build out the links of your sales process, audit each part and see where the bottleneck is because that tells you where to double down your efforts in making any changes. Okay. How do you effectively communicate the results of a high ticket group program? I feel like it's so transformative and I'm so excited, but I can't seem to translate that excitement to potential buyers. Thanks so much, Kate. Okay. So how do you communicate the result of a high ticket program? So the thing with high ticket offers, whether it's group program, mastermind, one-on-one coaching, VIP days, doesn't really matter what the offer is, to be honest with you. It could even be an event. The thing that you want to think about with communicating the result is you have to be able with an offer to start have one core promise. And I think that many people's offers miss this because everyone feels like they're selling the same thing. Like for me, my offers don't sell scaling. For example, my VIP day that I do, which is an intensive I do with scaling entrepreneurs, those are deep dive intensives that are designed for intensive clarity. They're actually not for ongoing feedback, refinement, and execution. They're literally for deep dive, snapshot clarity and unpacking the gaps or the areas of your business that you're not aware of that could be problems sitting underneath your nose. So when we think about a VIP day, the essence of why I sell that is clarity. Two, my accelerator mastermind is actually an aspect of getting an actual understanding of the blueprint and overall strategy for scaling. It's based off the idea that you don't have the fundamentals to scale. For example, you might not know how to audit a sales process. That's a fundamental of scaling. So we teach people basically the commandments of what it means to scale inside Accelerator. And that's the kind of core promise that we position to people. That's how they scale. So VIP day, you scale with clarity. Accelerator, you scale with the principles. One-on-one coaching, the sale on that or the promise on that is, yes, obviously I'm going to teach you strategy, but the actual reason someone invests in that is not just about the information, but also the access or the intimacy in coaching with myself. And so when people come into that, what we're selling is not just coaching, but mentorship, like actual CEO personal development guidance as the individual, as well as a strategy that individual is executing. And so what I find is when they go invest in private, they're actually investing equally as much in having someone like hand in hand and partnership in their business as they are strategy. So private, to me, the essence of it really of how we sell it as the core promise is partnership, having someone equally as invested in your business kind of thing as you are. So When we experience things like that and we're going through these different offers and we're looking at, we're seeing what we want to buy, you want to think about what is the core promise that someone sees from your marketing, from your sales page, from your call that you're having. And it's really important when you're trying to sell an offer, because if you're trying to communicate, this is the outcome, what is the promise of what you're trying to achieve? Is it helping them to get clarity? Is it helping them to make money? Is it helping them to learn a specific thing? Like, what is the one thing that they're going to walk away with? Now, once I have that thing, then I almost want you to think about, like, you put that one thing in the middle. So I might put like clarity in the middle of a piece of paper. And around that, I want to be able to explain in 50 different ways, how do I get somebody clarity? If I get them that thing, what's going to happen? So, for example, if someone does a VIP day with me, the essence is clarity. So, clarity for me could be for a business helping them to discover their blind spots. Well, how is that impactful for them? Well, if I help you to discover your blind spots, it means that you might have potential opportunities in your business in this given moment that are right underneath your nose that you could capitalize on to be able to double or triple your business. But I would say, think about the one core promise. Why should someone, and this is an answer that I would love for everybody listening to take a second and ask themselves, why should I invest with you? Like, if I was to put you against the other top performing individual in your space, why should I invest with you specifically? And the amount of entrepreneurs I've asked this question to who can't answer it, like, oh, well, like the number one answer I get is, I give really good support. Don't you think every other entrepreneur on the internet is going to say the same thing? I give really good support is not enough of a distinguishing factor for why your offer and your business are unique. You need to be able, in any offer that you're marketing, to be able to communicate why I specifically should work with you and why you're helping me to solve a problem in a bigger, better, easier, or different way than anybody else in the market. Tell me how you're doing it uniquely and why you. If you couldn't have the reason be because you give really good support. Okay? And it's a really important question because so many people cannot answer this. And it's something that I'm asking you because your ideal client is asking themselves that question. Your ideal client is asking themselves, why should I hire Sarah instead of Stephanie? And if you can't even answer that question for yourself around your business, that means you can't possibly market that clarity through your messaging so that the person investigating your services has it as well. And so it's a really important question that you have to be able to answer if you are someone who not only wants to see your offer succeed, but potentially who has multiple offers you want to see succeed. Okay, so then we go to question number 7. How do I scale when I'm at capacity? Okay, I have so many things I want to say to this question. There's so much. This is a good question. I feel like that should be its own podcast. I might do that. I'm going to mentally note that down for later. There's only a couple categories of what I look at when the person is at capacity. Number 1 is the overall big picture or the strategy, which is the fact that you may be at capacity because what you're currently doing right now is actually not something scalable. So like, say, for example, I only did one-on-one clients. It might mean that I need to actually genuinely change the way that I'm doing business because I can't have 52 one-on-one clients. Like, it just wouldn't work. So it could be a little bit about the fact that your actual current strategy is genuinely not scalable. And so because that, you need a new approach to be able to go to the next level because you've hit the peak of the capacity you can with the current structure that's with you. The second thing that I would say is processes. So basically, either number 1, get a different perspective on your strategy. Number 2, getting processes in place and automations in place. So getting a way that is systematized in the way that you do things so that you can then look for opportunities to automate those or systematize those. But it all starts with getting an understanding of your process. You cannot automate or systematize something that isn't properly documented. So like, for example, if somebody doesn't have a really good like onboarding process that's working manually, we have no reason that we should be automating it or putting it into a system because it's not working alone as it is. So why we make it into something that happens without us involved? So you really want to make sure that you do have consistent processes and outcomes that you can then take that and systematize it and automate it. That's a way that, let's just assume your strategy was good and you're like, okay, like I do have scalability here, but I want to try to refine. Then we go into trying to create more automations and more systems for you. So things are happening without you necessarily having to work or be on the entire time. Now, let's just say we've done those things. Your strategy is dialed in, your systems and your automations are dialed in. Then, if we can't adjust the strategy any more than we have, and if we can't automate or systematize any more than we have for where you're currently at in business, the next stage really is to delegate, which is really looking at taking one of the processes that you just documented. And instead of having those done by a machine or an automation, we would have those done by a person instead. And so we'd have somebody own that department or that outcome for you with the business. And so for me, I really think that when we're looking at like, what do I do when I'm at cap? It's kind of a tiered system, because I think the first thing that people do is they're like, I'm just going to hire somebody. I'm just going to hire somebody. Well, yes. And sometimes, again, that makes sense. But when you're hiring someone, it should only be when you've hit a certain piece or a place in your business where you feel like you've documented enough to warrant hiring someone. When people hire somebody onto their business, but they have no documentation or they haven't tried to really systematize any of it, it oftentimes doesn't work because you're not bringing someone into a sound structure to begin with. And so that's kind of how I would approach understanding your capacity. Obviously, it's a very loaded question in the sense of the fact of it depends on capacity in what? Capacity in your marketing, capacity in your sales, capacity in your delivery. There's a lot of different aspects that contribute to capacity. So obviously, if you do need more targeted answering, just shoot a message over to me in the DMs. Happy to kind of dive in with you. Okay. Question number 8. What systems do you recommend to implement in a coaching business to simplify things and really maximize your time? So great question. So here's the thing, systems. I think there's a big difference between a process, a system, and then a platform. So I'm assuming you're saying platforms, because usually when I get this question, often people mean platforms. So I'll give you kind of my current platform suite. So currently right now, I would say the big hub for our business is ClickUp. We use that for basically everything in our business at this time. We have a couple things that are still on Airtable, which is where we used to house a lot of our business stuff. And then we're starting to kind of move away from Airtable and more just entirely into ClickUp. I would say for our platform, for client delivery, we use Kartra, and we've been really enjoying that quite a bit. It's always been something that's kind of been part of our business for the last couple of years now. So Kartra, and then we also do Dubsado. Dubsado is for our contracts and our payments. Outside of that, I wouldn't say we have a lot of extra things that we do. Like we have in the sense of like, obviously we use Riverside for our podcast, and we use Frame.io for video editing feedback, and Descript for some of the editing. Like we have different behind the scenes systems that we use or platforms that we use. But that's more of the platform specific. And I really do think platforms are really based off of like what kind of functionality you need to have. So for example, in Kartra, when you're a scaling business, you have a lot of payments coming and going. It's very difficult to make custom payment links inside of Kartra easily, which was actually why we moved over to Dubsado. And this brings me back to a point that I really want to, hit home on. With building out any kind of system or building out any kind of anything, like if someone wants to like really refine their onboarding or really adjust their offboarding or like, well, frankly, just change anything or systematize anything in their business, the first question I'm going to ask you is, what's the problem you're trying to solve? Because the thing that I see a lot of the times is that people are trying to create these really complex systems and automations and all of these really complex processes in their business, when frankly, that problem doesn't exist. So like my rule is you only create a process for something that's a problem. Like if you're not going to have, let's just say someone's like, I really want to build out a really fancy onboarding portal. One of the things that I'm going to ask is, how many clients do you have? Because if you have 2 clients, you have no reason to be building out an onboarding portal. Or like if someone is like a team of 1, you don't need a massive ClickUp build out by yourself with all of these, intricacies necessarily. If you don't have somebody to manage the thing that you just built, now you've built yourself, by building this massive thing, a part-time job to oversee it and manage all of the tasks and the subtasks and the notifications, right? So like, I think that it's really important when we're thinking about building out anything in the sense of systems or automations or processes to also be very conscious of why we're doing it. And for me, I think I have also myself, I want to be very transparent. I have definitely fallen into like shiny object syndrome of what a system could look like or what a system could do for me. But it also doesn't mean it's always warranted. And it doesn't mean that it's actually going to help me in my business in any way. And what I see people do is they get like really nerding out on the back end of their business, but then nothing really changes once they build it. Like you build the ClickUp or you build the Dubsado where like you build the thing and then when you build it, nothing changes. And that's because there wasn't an actual problem for the reason that you created that in the first place. So because of that, because there was no problem to solve, you're not feeling any relief once you created it. So I'm a firm believer of like expand your platforms and expand your systems and automations as your business develops. Like our client management system was a byproduct of having too many clients, like, and not having what we needed to keep track of everybody, right? That's how we created it. Our onboarding was a byproduct of the fact that our program was expanding and developing, and we didn't have an onboarding that really represented all the supports in a really easy and concise way for people to understand. That's how that came to be. So it's not really a matter of just like sitting down on a Friday and coming up with all the systems and automations you could create. Sure, you could do that as an opportunity for development for the next stage of where you're going. But again, even that in itself is a problem to solve. You might say, okay, well, right now I have 20 clients and I want to have 50 clients. So if I had 50 clients, what would break? You might identify a problem that way and then go to develop it. But again, you always should do this with a problem in mind because otherwise, if not, you're really just getting sucked into this shiny object syndrome, in my opinion. So, question number 9, should I put pricing and service descriptions on my website? Oh boy, this is a long-winded one, but I'll keep it short. Okay. Here's my synopsis of pricing on the website. So, hmm. Okay. So there's so many things I want to say. Okay. I'm going to break it down into categories. Category 1, putting pricing on your website. Pros and cons. Pro, people can see your pricing. So if someone wants to work with you, they already know what your rates are. They know what it's like to invest with you. And so because of that, you're not going to get anybody typically who's getting on the phone with you who doesn't want to invest because they already know what your investment to work with you is. So option 1, having it on your site, it's good in that way. It's bad in the sense of the fact that people will see your price and sometimes write off the offer just on the price tag alone and nothing else. And we just know the 101 of sales is that sometimes when you have a sales experience with somebody, i.e. they can really talk to you about the offering and how it's going to help you, it does obviously help with the sale in the sense of the fact that people are like, oh, well, like now that I know the experience connected to the dollar, I see it a little bit differently. It's a very common practice in businesses. So if you have pricing on your website and you just have it there, yes, you will probably get less consults because people are seeing your price and again, kind of maybe pre-qualifying that they're not ready for it or don't want to invest it. So that could happen. You also, will have though people when they do get on the phone with you that they already know your price and they're more primed and kind of ready to buy because they came in eyes wide open. So there's that. Second piece, on the other side of the spectrum would be not sharing your pricing at all, which is what I do for my business technically. So I don't have my pricing on my website. I just have like low four figures, high 5 figures, whatever it might be. And with my pricing on my website, I basically don't have it on there because after talking to so many clients, they literally told me, they're like, Kate, if I had known your price before I talked to you, there's no chance I would have booked a call. Like there's no chance. I would have been so scared just on the investment alone because like some of my clients have invested like, like $60,000. And they were like, I didn't go in when I was looking for a business coach being like, I want to spend $60,000. But like, that's just what they ended up spending. But they fully told me they would not have spent it or have got through the whole process to see all the pieces of what was the potential in working with me if they had just seen the price tag. So like the price tag would have distracted me and I would have not almost been able to like look away kind of thing, right? So in hearing so much of that feedback, for me, it was kind of like confirming or reaffirming of the fact that I don't want to share my prices because I want to have at least an opportunity to be able to showcase to somebody what our team or myself in coaching can do for someone. And if I feel like the pricing is kind of going to like deter them, then I want to make sure that I have an opportunity to talk to them. Now, I want to also clarify, it doesn't mean you have to get on the phone with me. Like if you message me and you're like, hey, I'm interested in working with you, I'll ask you 2-3 questions and I'll send you the price in DMs. So it's not like I'm like really like massively withholding it. It's just more a matter of the fact that I'm not plastering it everywhere necessarily. So that's that. Now in the middle though, we have the hybrid approach, which I'm a big fan of as well. So I, for example, had a client who was a website designer and she used to have all her pricing on her website. And when she did, the problem was she was like, Kate, like I have tons of people clicking my website, but none of these people are buying. Like none of them, like she's like, I have no idea who they are. I just see the clicks on my website. I've got a lot of traffic, but nobody's moving. And what I kind of came to identify or realize with her was the fact that I was like, listen, we can't just leave these leads to like die on your website. We really need to find something else that allows us to be able to capitalize on the leads that are in your world. So what we did was we took the pricing down off her website. So we still had the services available. We still had, what she did for clients and stuff available, but we didn't have the prices specifically on there. So what we did instead was that we actually had put a package and pricing guide on her website. So we had an opt-in. So what we did is we said, click here to download my package and pricing guide. And so what ended up happening was she was able to collect their name, their Instagram handle, and their email. And so now she actually was able to go and follow the people who were downloading her package and pricing guide and saying, hey, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. And we also had them part of a nurture and an email sequence after that point that allowed them to kind of be like ongoing nurtured and activated. And so the amount of emails that we added to her list was insane. The amount of opportunities that we gave her to have touch points to nurture people was insane. And so, yeah, I would just say like across the board, it just on all facets was much, much better than just having it on the site, because by leaving it on the site, we really had no data. We had no information to move from. So just by putting it behind an email wall, that alone did leaps and bounds in the sense of how many emails we were able to collect. And then from there, obviously the next steps that we could take. So when it comes to should I put my pricing on my website, it's really individual. Like I don't think there's a right or wrong with this. I genuinely will say it's personal preference. My personal preference is not to put it on my website, but I also have a lot of clients and peers who do. And then I also have people kind of like that client I was just describing who are kind of like a hybrid of both. So this is one of those buckets where I think you kind of have to do what feels right for you. And I think that's totally okay. And there's a strategic way to do all of them. So there's wins in every single bucket. So all of that to say, you guys, holy smokes, that hour flew by quickly. I absolutely love doing these episodes. I feel like these are very common questions that I even get like in coaching. These are things that I'm hearing in conversations behind the scenes at like masterminds. Like these are all just such good questions. And I think just also so immensely helpful for other people to be able to listen into. And so I also want to encourage you, if you have something that maybe jogged as kind of like a question for yourself today, take a quick second, head to the website, submit the form and pop your question in. As I said, this is something that is entirely anonymous. We do not share any personal insight about people on the show at all. It really is just something that we have as a way to, number one, be able to serve you and any questions that you may have for your business, but also is really just something that allows these episodes to be so specifically targeted to what you're experiencing in your business and what's coming up for you. So all of that to be said, my friends, thank you so much for tuning in this week. Always a blast to be able to get to hang out with you and talk business and talk all the things of next steps in scaling. As always, if you have anything that's coming up for you, if there's anything that I can do or our team can do to support you in any way, feel free to slide in my DMs. I always love hearing from you guys, your feedback of how the show resonated, what kind of landed for you, and also maybe even any other topics that you feel would be super supportive for you and for where you're at right now. But all of that being said, we will see you next week. And as always, stay ambitious.